Welcome to the AWS Executive Insights podcast. My name is Stephen Brozovich. I'm part of our enterprise strategy team at AWS. I'm joined by my colleagues Jake Burns and Miriam McLemore. Today, we're going to be spending time talking a little bit about the impact of agentic AI on modern organizations. And we spend a lot of time talking to customers in our day-to-day. So I'm curious, what are the things you're hearing from customers about the changes and impact that agentic AI are having on their organizations?
Yeah, Stephen, I think, and Jake, I'm sure, you're hearing the same. They're trying to figure out, how do I upskill my team? Do I need to hire new talent as well? How do I mix it? What does the org look like? And they're asking all the questions, right? Yeah. This is not just a new technology to train the tech stack. This is full business engagement.
Yeah.
Is that what you're hearing?
Yeah, absolutely. So, if we're talking about agentic AI, I'm still hearing a lot of questions about kind of what it is exactly. And to be honest, I think in this moment in time, there's several definitions. So it's an interesting question to answer. But in terms of the workforce, it's kind of like what we saw with cloud, but just far faster and much higher impact, I would say. So how do we leverage this technology in order to make our employees more productive, but actually do things that they weren't able to do before and make their jobs more fulfilling? That's kind of the key, I think, for this.
Well, when you're seeing this have such a broader impact, I mean, you mentioned of cloud. Cloud primarily affected your tech employees. It was a new way of kind of doing tech or deploying product, building on technology. Agentic actually opens the doors for transformation across the entire enterprise in a really interesting way. And so I'm finding a lot of our customers are maybe even struggling with what even is our business, or how do we even approach this space now that there are so many different possibilities. So as you've walked customers through or had these conversations, what are some patterns you're seeing that are starting to emerge that are maybe helping differentiate those customers that are able to face the challenge well and those customers that really feel at a loss? Yeah,
the thing that I'm seeing, and it's actually something we've talked about for a long time, which is integrating teams. Because I agree with you, Stephen. Cloud was unfortunately often regulated just to IT. It shouldn't have been, right? The business needs to understand what they're accomplishing. But with Agentic, it is a change of how the business will operate, and it requires those integrated teams that are focused on business outcomes to be successful, or at least that's the companies that I'm seeing make progress versus the ones waiting in the wings.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's such a wide range of topics on this, all from kind of level of acceptance that this is happening and that there's a sense of urgency. So there's levels to that. But then the ones that are actually doing things, the ones that I predict will be very successful, is anybody who is in charge of data, right? Those people overnight became much, much more valuable to these organizations. And anyone who's in charge of data with agentic AI, they're now overnight became one of the most important people in the entire company, because data really is your differentiator with agentic AI. And so the ones that are very smart, that are thinking ahead, they're really getting their data in order, because they're realizing that this technology, if we're being honest, is going to become very commoditized. Everyone has access to it, and that's a feature. But what's going to make you different than this new startup? If you're an enterprise that's been collecting data for sometimes decades, and you have all of this proprietary data, that's your competitive advantage, but only if it's out of silos, only if it's accessible to this technology, and only if your employees know how to use this technology to leverage that data.
I completely agree, because there used to be a mindset in many organizations, data is power, right? And so I'm going to hold and control my data. And certainly security of data is always going to be, still is critical, but we have to start with what is the business outcome that that organization is trying to drive, and identify the right data. Because I lived in organizations where we just collected data just in case. We might need it someday. Right now, we're going to integrate finally structured and unstructured data to drive outcomes. And that's a different mindset for data management, data governance, data ownership.
So you both brought up the importance and the value maybe of the data that the organization already has. One of the patterns I'm seeing about companies that are really being more successful in adopting the technology is when they clearly understand what their differentiator actually is in the market. Because what we're seeing is the path to go from idea to implementation is potentially drastically shortened through the use of these new tools and technologies. And so now it really becomes critical to really understand what is the thing that really distinguishes my business from other businesses, and how do I connect that business value has to be connected to that differentiated piece. Because just to be frank, the undifferentiated workloads are the ones that are going to continue to get shortened and continue to go away. Roles that support undifferentiated work are likely the ones that are going to be most impacted by this type of change. What else maybe are you seeing in terms of the people and the talent impact for this effort?
Well, there's so much there, Stephen, and I think you hit the nail on the head. So if data is your differentiator, the other half of that is your workforce's ability to use this technology. I think that's your differentiator. So for all the organizations that are out there that maybe aren't sitting on a massive trove of data, like didn't have someone like Miriam there who just stored it away just in case, there's still hope, because I think I don't know what the split is, 50-50 in terms of impact, we'll see. But perhaps even more important than the data, in fact, is your employees' willingness to use it and ability to use it and willingness to learn and adapt and change. Mm-hmm. I mean, this has been true for quite a while, but I'd say it's becoming more true. The most important attribute you can have as an employee or as an organization is your ability to adapt and adapt quickly. And the speed at which you have to do that is it's picking up. It's getting faster.
And I couldn't agree with you more. Agility. And we've been preaching agility, agile working methods, all the things for a long time. But now it's not a choice, and it's not just IT. It's not just agile methods in IT. It is an integrated business, technology, data, security team that comes together to drive an outcome. And that way of working, to your question about talent and skills, is different for most organizations.
I mean, we've been seeing this trend for a while now. A lot of organizations that maybe are still operating almost in an industrial mindset where you add 3 widgets and you get a particular outcome. And we know really, I mean, I think about deterministic and non-deterministic outcomes. And what this is really enabling is experimentation at very low cost and at very high speed, which means we don't have to be tied to this old way of thinking that says, this is my input, thus I will get this output. In fact, some of the challenges I think our customers are running into is that even their reward structure within their organization is making an assumption that I can decide something in January and I will know it's the right thing to do 12 months later so that you get a bonus. What are some of the maybe disincentives that you're seeing in customers that are maybe working against their desire to shift to a more agile mindset?
And that's such an important point because, okay, so we talk about technology. We changed the technology team. Now we're integrating the business teams into that. We're figuring out how to fund it with finance. But often HR is left out. And we have to have different mechanisms for reward and identifying what's good, what's a behavior that we want to incent, and what are behaviors that we want to deprecate.
And we want to incent experimentation.
Yeah.
And I would say we should have been doing that all along, but now it's a necessity. It's an existential necessity, I would say. You have to reward experimentation. And I think there's a couple areas where I see customers getting this maybe slightly wrong. One is that they're rewarding adoption. And adoption is not experimentation, right? Just because I logged into the tool and I did something that's exactly how I did things before or try to replicate that, that's not experimentation. We have to reward real experimentation. And the problem is in a lot of organizations, that kind of experimentation is actually punished.
Yes.
The second problem I see is kind of conflating the idea of governance and innovation and experimentation. And this goes back to kind of your original question, which is what are customers asking, for guidance on? And one of the big ones is how do we balance that? How do we innovate? How do we experiment while at the same time put in, very sensible governance, which it can look like a trade-off. I don't think it has to be one, but I think that's one of the major problems to solve. And if you get that right, I think that you can get a lot of this right.
Well, and that's where leadership has to show up, right? Because this just expecting the teams to figure it out without leaders actually demonstrating that taking risk is going to be rewarded, right? And we're going to learn when it doesn't work out exactly as we anticipated.
Yeah.
And that, again, it's a new muscle
Yeah.
for teams.
Well, and I think, the leader's impact on organizational culture is huge. And so if I'm trying to foster a spirit of innovation and experimentation, I do actually sometimes need to go back and even look at the promotion process, because I could advocate for innovation, et cetera, but then look at the last 10 people who got promoted and what are the actual behaviors that we are rewarding. So I spent a lot of time with our customers talking about organizational culture. And in my mind, that shows up in how we make decisions and which behaviors are actually rewarded. You've got your company statement and your values, but unless your actual business practices are living into those values, this is going to be an area where you really, really struggle. And I would say when you have kind of those clear values and they're being reinforced by the business, that's what actually can create some of those governance models. It's kind of autonomy with mental model guardrails around decision making, along clearly with the automated guardrails of technology. But all of those things together to really create the right infrastructure so that those teams can actually be successful.
Yeah, and then communicate that. I don't know if your experience is like mine, but the corporate rumor network was the fastest way to find out what was really the company value statements.
Yeah.
And so having leadership authentically talk about a risk we took, an experiment we did, how we did it, and what the outcome was is so important. Because there's going to be people on the team that go, oh, thank God, the rules are finally done. I can go cowboy my way right into the future. And that's also not what we're looking for, right? Security, identity, access management, all those things are still absolutely critical.
If not even more critical. And one of the challenges I do see is companies that have really advocated, they say we're democratizing everything, and they don't put the right kind of guardrails in place, both from a technology and a mindset perspective. The problem is you run into reputational risk. You put something out there in the market that could actually do significant trust damage to your brand and to your organization. What are you seeing, Jake, as far as maybe controls around that, or even the mental models that people are deploying to be successful in creating that space?
There's been some high profile examples of that, right? Mm-hmm. And I think probably everyone is familiar with it. If not, you can search for it. But you alluded to something earlier, and Miriam touched on it. I think it was super important. It's that disconnect between what leaders say and what the incentive structure actually incentivizes. And I think that's one of the biggest problems that we're seeing right now, and it's getting worse. So how do we overcome that is the real question. I would say something Miriam said, it's that rumor network. It's really the fastest communication network in the world.
Yep.
We need, as leaders, we need feedback loops. We need to really understand what's going on in that rumor network, which means we have to talk to our employees. So I see a big anti-pattern that I see even before this, but this with Agentic AI, it's just everything's moving faster, and it's this thing where you're getting information from your directs, and that's being filtered by their directs and so forth and so on. It's this game of telephone, and you're living in a bubble, right? You're surrounding yourself with a reality distortion field, but not in a good way, right? So it's a real easy problem to solve, though. Just go talk to your employees. You have to earn their trust, so they'll be honest with you. But have some of those employees maybe directly report into you. Maybe have some of those employees, maybe it's like, one step removed, where you have people who are trusted, who are in those communities, who know what's actually being said and what's actually being done and how employees are getting around the rules and what they're doing, and talk to those people. But you really have to have that feedback loop of truth. That's the key.
Well, and then paying attention to what's actually happening with the talent across the organization. A lot of people are very concerned right now.
Yes.
A lot of employees in many organizations are actually asking themselves kind of fairly existential questions about, I knew what my job was. I don't know what my job is going to be. And I think that's generally going to be true for everybody in this age. Now, as you think and you've talked about the customers you've worked with, how are they thinking about the attraction of talent in this uncertain environment? What are you hearing?
All right, I guess I'm going to have to add a third thing. If the data is your differentiator, their ability to use the technology, the third is going to be, can you upskill your current employees? And the reason why, it's not just because it's the right thing to do. It's not just because it's easier to do. Good luck hiring an agentic AI engineer, right? Let's be honest, especially if you're an insurance company. You're not in big tech, right? So the key to all of being successful with this is taking your existing employees, first of all, making them see this not as a threat, but as an opportunity, because it really is. It's both, depending on how they act, but it really is a huge opportunity. And I would say an unprecedented one.
Yeah.
Get them to see that point of view. So be a good leader and communicate and, inspire them. Give them the tools and the test environments so they can innovate and run those experiments in a safe way with guardrails, with all of that, with strong governance, and then incentivize them to do those experiments and to learn. And I think I know it's a lot, but those are the things that you should have been doing anyway, I would argue. Yeah. It's just so much more important now. And to answer your question more directly, I would say you shouldn't be primarily looking to the market and trying to attract those people. I do have an answer for that, and I think there's a place for that, but I think your default should be to use the people you have. And the reason is because they understand how your organization works already. And that's very difficult to teach to new people. And you can leverage that. Yes. Just like you can leverage your data, you can leverage that tribal knowledge and that institutional knowledge and those relationships and all of that. Put this technology on top of it, and then you have something very powerful.
When you go back to that rumor network, people are going to know if your company is a good place to work because they're going to talk to people. They're going to hear about, are you training people? Are you making it a safe place to experiment? And that, reputation of you as an employer in this world of hiring and attracting and keeping talent is critical. And having a purpose and an approach, because some organizations are going down the path of just kind of mass training. Look, we trained you. We have found that's not the effective way to go. We found that it's much more effective if you have a business outcome, a project that you're going to work on, bring the team together, get trained as a group, learn together, share ideas, and that creates some culture. But culture is important. We very much believe that at Amazon.
So Miriam, you touched on the organizational culture aspect of the talent. And Jake, as you mentioned as well, when we see companies that are, I need to hire a bunch of people, they're not seeing the benefit that they have of their current workforce, not just in terms of, I don't have to hire more people, but in terms of the cultural aspects of the organization. I often get this question from companies about how do you attract new tech talent? And my question to them is, who are your best people? Do you even know why they are there? And chances are that's what's differentiating you in employees' eyes is probably not the perks or even the tech stack that they get to work on. It's the organizational culture. And if we can foster that spirit of culture, that's actually what's going to drive our ability to attract and retain talent.
Completely.
Absolutely. How you do it is you become the type of organization that top talent wants to work for.
Yeah.
It's you become that, and then they come to you. And to your point, free lunches are cool, like the vending machine, you don't have to put money in and all of that. And of course, pay is important, but I would even argue that more important for high performers, right? Because it's different for different cohorts, but the top performers, what they care about most is that they have an opportunity to continue to grow, to work on very interesting projects with people like them. So chances to collaborate with other smart people in an organization that encourages collaboration so that they can grow their skill sets, that they can do interesting work and have leave a legacy, right?
And be connected to a purpose.
Absolutely.
That they believe in.
Agree.
All right. Well, thanks so much for spending time. This has been a fun conversation. Excited to be hanging out and see what the future brings.
Indeed.